Have you ever walked away from a conversation and realized you'd shared far more than you intended? You revealed secrets you'd planned to keep, admitted fears you rarely voice, or exposed vulnerabilities you thought were buried. Most of us chalk this up to coincidence, or assume we simply got comfortable. But the truth is far more deliberate and psychologically fascinating. What you experienced is called elicitation, and it's a powerful technique that skilled communicators use to extract information from others without force, coercion, or even obvious intent. If you work in psychology, law enforcement, business, or any field where understanding human behavior matters, this knowledge is invaluable. So stick around as we explore how elicitation works, why people reveal more than they realize, and how to recognize when it's happening to you. If you're interested in the psychology behind everyday human behavior, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a deeper dive into how our minds actually work. Elicitation is fundamentally different from interrogation. When most people think of extracting information, they imagine a detective barking questions across a metal table under harsh fluorescent lights. But elicitation is softer, more subtle, and paradoxically far more effective. It relies on psychological principles rather than pressure. The elicitor creates an environment where the subject feels safe, understood, and genuinely listened to. They build rapport first, trust second, and only then does information flow naturally, almost involuntarily. The person being elicited often doesn't realize they're being questioned at all. They believe they're simply having a conversation with someone who genuinely cares about what they think and feel. One of the core principles behind elicitation is something psychologists call the reciprocity principle. When someone shares something personal with you, you feel an almost irresistible urge to share something personal back. It's hardwired into our social nature. An elicitor understands this deeply. They begin by sharing something vulnerable or personal themselves, something that seems relevant, but isn't critical to what they actually want to know. Maybe they mention a struggle at work, a relationship difficulty, or a fear they've been wrestling with. This vulnerability invites you to reciprocate. You lower your guard, you match their emotional openness, and suddenly you're sharing things you'd normally keep private. The elicitor never demanded anything, they simply created a space where reciprocity felt natural and necessary. Another powerful mechanism is what's known as the consistency principle. Once you've stated something publicly, even in a private conversation, you feel compelled to stay consistent with that statement. If you say you value honesty, you'll find yourself being honest even when silence would be easier. If you admit you care about someone, you'll reveal more about that relationship than you initially intended. A skilled elicitor will ask seemingly innocent questions that prompt you to stake out a position or express a value. Once you've done that, follow-up questions become harder to avoid without appearing hypocritical or evasive. You've already committed to honesty or openness, so continuing in that vein feels like the only authentic choice. Then there's the question of framing. How information is presented, or how a question is phrased, dramatically influences what you reveal. If someone asks you directly, "Do you ever feel jealous in your relationships?" you might deflect or minimize. But if they ask, "Everyone feels a little jealous sometimes, right? What does that look like for you?" the framing has already normalized the feeling. You're not confessing something shameful. You're describing something universal. This technique is called presupposition. The elicitor embeds an assumption into the question, and you unconsciously accept that assumption as true and move forward from there. Suddenly you're not deciding whether to reveal jealousy. You're just explaining what yours looks like. Body language plays an enormous role in elicitation that most people never consciously recognize. An elicitor pays close attention to microexpressions, the tiny, involuntary facial movements that flash across your face for less than a second, revealing genuine emotion before your conscious mind can filter it. They notice when your pupils dilate, indicating heightened interest or arousal. They see when you bite your lip, signaling anxiety or uncertainty. They catch the moment your eye contact breaks, suggesting you might be withholding something or experiencing discomfort. But here's the critical part. They don't interrogate these signals. They simply acknowledge them with subtle changes in their own body language. They might lean in slightly, soften their expression, or pause just long enough to create space for you to fill the silence. This nonverbal communication often speaks louder than words. and it tells you that they see you, they understand you, and they're not judging what they see. The power of silence is vastly underestimated in everyday conversation. Most of us are uncomfortable with silence, so we rush to fill it with words. An elicitor knows this. After asking a question, they simply wait. They don't fidget. They don't look away. They just sit with the quiet and let it become slightly uncomfortable. That discomfort creates pressure, not through aggression, but through awkwardness. To escape the silence, you speak, you elaborate, you add details you didn't plan to share, you explain your reasoning, your feelings, your motivations, all because the alternative, silence, felt worse. This technique is so effective that it's taught in every professional interrogation and sales training program in the world. The silence isn't hostile, it's just present, and that presence has tremendous power. Active listening is another cornerstone of successful elicitation, and it's radically different from the way most of us actually listen. When we listen passively, we're often already planning what we'll say next, or we're judging what we're hearing, or we're filtering it through our own biases and experiences. Active listening means you're entirely focused on understanding the other person's perspective. You ask clarifying questions not to challenge them, but to genuinely comprehend their viewpoint. You reflect back what you've heard to confirm you understand. You make eye contact. You nod at appropriate moments. You mirror their body language subtly. All of this signals that you're fully present and fully engaged. And when people feel truly heard, they open up. They share more. They go deeper. This is especially effective if you've already liked the video. So if this explanation of active listening resonates with you, please do hit that like button, because it genuinely helps us create more content like this. Now, let's talk about what researchers call the foot in the door technique, which is directly tied to elicitation. It works like this. You start by asking for something small, something the person will almost certainly agree to. Maybe you ask them to share their opinion on a trivial matter, or you ask them to do a small favor. They agree. This agreement creates a psychological shift. They've now identified themselves as someone who helps, someone who shares, someone who engages. It's subtle, but it matters. Once they've made that small commitment, follow-up requests for bigger commitments feel more aligned with the identity they've just adopted. They're not starting from a position of, should I share this private thing? They're starting from, I'm someone who shares and helps, so naturally, I'll engage with this request too. The elicitor has essentially installed a frame that makes further revelation feel consistent with self-image. Context and environment matter far more than most of us realize. An elicitor carefully constructs the physical and social environment to maximize openness. A coffee shop with warm lighting and comfortable seating will generate more honest conversation than a sterile conference room under fluorescent lights. Casual clothing puts people at ease in ways that formal business attire does not. Privacy, or the feeling of privacy, is essential. If you're worried someone might overhear, you'll guard your words. But if you feel secure, you'll speak freely. Temperature matters too. Studies show that people are more open and generous in warm environments, both literally and metaphorically. An elicitor controls these variables intentionally. They're not leaving anything to chance. There's also a psychological phenomenon called the halo effect that works powerfully in elicitation. If an elicitor is attractive, well-dressed, intelligent, or charismatic, you unconsciously assume they have other positive qualities too. You trust them more readily. You assume good intent. You're more willing to reveal yourself to someone you perceive as high status or trustworthy. This isn't shallow or foolish. It's just how human psychology works. We make snap judgments based on limited information, and those judgments influence how openly we interact with people. An elicitor understands this and either leverages their own positive qualities or works to build those perceptions through competence and warmth in the interaction itself. The use of hypothetical questions is another sophisticated technique in the elicitation playbook. Instead of asking, have you ever lied to your partner, an elicitor might ask, if you were in a situation where telling the truth would really hurt someone you love, would you tell it anyway? The hypothetical creates distance from personal confession. It feels safer because it's abstract. But while you're thinking through the hypothetical, you're actually processing your own values and experiences. You might answer the question theoretically, but your reasoning reveals your actual beliefs and behaviors. An elicitor listens not just to what you say, but to the logic underlying it, because that logic often mirrors your real-world choices. Another layer of elicitation involves building a false consensus. An elicitor might casually mention that most people in your position feel frustrated sometimes, or I've talked to a lot of people in your field. and they all worry about falling behind. By suggesting that your feelings, thoughts, or behaviors are normal and widespread, they reduce the shame or defensiveness around admitting them. If everyone feels this way, admitting it isn't a weakness or a confession. It's just being human. This technique is called normalization, and it's enormously effective at lowering psychological defenses. Mirroring and matching are subtly powerful tools in elicitation. When an elicitor subtly mimics your speech patterns, your pace of talking, your tone of voice, or even your posture, you unconsciously like them more. This phenomenon is called the chameleon effect, and it's automatic. You feel rapport with them, even though you can't quite put your finger on why. That sense of connection makes you more willing to open up. You feel like they understand you because, on some level, they're literally matching your rhythm. It's not manipulation in the sense of deception, but it is strategically used to create connection and openness. So the next time you find yourself revealing more than you expected, pause and ask yourself why. Were you with someone who made you feel genuinely safe and heard? Did they use specific techniques to lower your defenses? Did they ask presuppositional questions that guided your thinking? Did you reciprocate their vulnerability? Did they create a sense of consistency that made continued openness feel necessary? The answers don't make your revelation wrong or foolish. They just make you aware. And awareness is where wisdom begins. You don't need to shut down or become guarded. You just need to understand the psychological landscape you're navigating, make intentional choices about what you share, and recognize that the same skills that elicit information from you can be used to understand others more deeply and to build genuine connection. Start noticing these patterns in your own conversations, and you'll never experience dialogue quite the same way again.